Restructuring SAS datasets, multiple records to a single record. The dataset we will be using for this demonstration is called RISE-BIT4, and it's an Excel spreadsheet which has Hamilton Depression Rating Scale, HDRS, scores on 66 depressed subjects across time. Subjects were given IPL for 4 weeks and their drug plasma levels were obtained during each week. Drug plasma levels of DPL were also obtained. The variables in order on the spreadsheet were patient number, HDRS, which was the change from baseline score, week, which is coded 0 to 3, gender, diagnosis, IPL levels, and DPL levels. So I'm going to read in this data with the import wizard, and I'm going to do a proc contents of the data to see what it looks like. I'm using the option var_num so that we see the variables on the proc contents in the order in which they appeared on the Excel spreadsheet. So here is the output from proc contents. Notice that we have 250 observations and 7 variables. The reason we have so many observations is that there are multiple records per patient, and we have 66 patients on our data set, but there was a record for each week that the patient was seen in the study. So in this next bit of code, I'm creating a SAS temporary data set called visit, and I'm going to print out 24 observations to see what this data set looks like. And first of all, before printing it out, I'm sorting the data by patient and then week. So we will see the data in the order of patient, number, and then within the patient, week. So here we see that patient 101 appears 4 times. There are 4 records for patient 101, a record for each week that the patient was seen, week 0 to 3. And we have the Hamilton Depression Score change from baseline recorded at each visit or each week. And we have their IPL level and their DPL level recorded at each week. We are interested in creating a single record per patient rather than having multiple records per patient. So the first way that we are going to do it is by using a proc means and an output statement. And by using the output statement in proc means, we are interested in getting the mean Hamilton Depression Score, the mean DPL level, and the mean IPL level for each patient. And we're also using the N statistic to count how many times each patient appeared in the data set. So was a patient seen all 4 weeks, or was a patient only seen 3 weeks? By using proc means, we end up with a single observation per patient. However, our measurements are summary measurements. So let's take a look at the proc print of the data set we've created called subject. And here we see a single observation for each patient. We have their gender, their diagnosis, the 2 automatic variables that are generated when we create an output statement, and we have the mean levels of Hamilton Depression Score, DPL, IPL, and the number of non-missing observations that were included for that particular variable. So patient 101 had 4 weeks of HDRS recorded. Patient 105 only had 3 weeks of HDRS, or Hamilton Depression Score, recorded. Notice also that with this proc means I had a class statement for patient, and the N-way option was included, so we didn't have a grand mean recorded across all the patients. I also included an ID statement in this proc means, and what this is going to do is it's going to include these variables sex and diagnosis on our new output data set. Again, with proc means, we've created a data set with 1 observation per patient, but it's just summary data. In this next example, I want to take our data set and create a data set with all the repeated values for a patient on the same observation. So we want our new data set to look like the data set that I'm showing in this comment statement. And the reason I want to be able to create a data set like this is it enables me to do things like look at whether there's a change in HDRS between any 2 weeks, or whether there's a change over the 3-week period, as well as allowing me to do certain types of multivariate analysis that requires the data to be in this format. So here are the steps that we are going to use to do this kind of restructuring of our data. And the way we're going to do this is all in terms of how we're going to work with our data step. The first thing we are going to do is sort our data equals visit, which was the original data set we created after bringing in the data. So if we go back here, notice we had created a data set data visit, which is just copying in the HDRS temporary SAS data set. So that's the main data set that we're working on, and it's called visit. And we're going to sort that data set first by patient and within patient by week. And then we are going to create a new data set subject to, we're bringing in the data set visit by patient. So we're processing each patient in order of their weekly visit. Next, we are going to use a retain statement, which tells SAS not to set the values of these variables to missing when the data step iterates. So the retain statement is used to hold the values of variables across iterations of the data step. Normally, all variables in the data step are set to missing at the start of each iteration of the data step. And then we are going to make use of this first dot and last dot logical variables. So the first dot patient is set to 1 when SAS is processing the first observation for a patient. So again, we've sorted our data set by patient and week. So the very first time that we process the observation for a particular patient, we want to set all these new variables to missing. So we're processing the very first observation for a particular patient. And we've set these variables to missing. And then we're going to go through these series of if, then, do, end statements. So if week equals 0, then we are going to create a new variable HDRS0 equals HDRS. So we're reading in the HDRS value into this new variable HDRS0. And we're reading in the IPL value into IPL0. And then we have an end. What SAS is going to do is it's then going to go back through the data step and pick up the next observation for that particular patient. And it's going to hold on to these values, HDRS0 and IPL0, because of the retain statement. And then it's going to iterate through the data step a second time. And this time, if week equals 1, it's going to create these variables HDRS1 and IPL1. It's going to go through the data step a third time, and if week equals 2, it's going to create HDRS2 and IPL2. And it's going to hold all those variables because, again, we're just processing one patient at a time. And finally, it's going to go through the data set a fourth time and see if week equals 3, create these variables HDRS3 and IPL3. And if it's the last patient observation for that particular patient, only then does it output the observation. So when an explicit output is included in the data step, SAS no longer does its automatic output at the bottom of the data step. And note again that the first dot patient and last dot patient, this dot patient, patient is the name of the variable that we had sorted our data set by. And finally, we are going to keep these variables on our data set. Patient, sex, diagnosis, and these new variables that we've created, HDRS0 to HDRS3, IPL0 to IPL3. So let's run all of this code and see what our new data set subject 2 looks like. And we're going to only print out the first 7 observations. So here are the first 7 observations of our new data set where we have 1 observation per patient data set. And so all of the information for patient 101 is in 1 observation. We don't have 4 separate observations for that particular patient. And if we go look at our log, we see here that there were 250 observations read from the dataset work.visit, our SAS temporary dataset, and the dataset work.subject2 has 66 observations and 11 variables. So again, our original dataset was on 66 patients, but we had had 250 observations read from that original dataset. Our new dataset now just has the 66 observations because all the information for a single patient is on 1 row. So the code to do this within the data step starts with the proc sort of the original dataset. Then we're creating our new transformed dataset, and we're making use of the retain statement and the first dot and last dot variables. Very important, we are processing by patient, by the individual, and then we are using an explicit output statement. I recommend using this example code for times when you need to restructure your data set. It's a lot easier to write this program if you are working from some example code. The last way that we can transform our data set so that we have a single observation per patient rather than multiple observations per patient is with the SAS utility proc transpose. So proc transpose reverses the rows and columns of a data set. It can be used to restructure data sets, although it is not as flexible as the method I showed above. Our dataset visit needs to be sorted by patient to do proc transpose. And so in the procedure we have proc transpose data equals visit. So that's the temporary data set that we are reading in. And the output data set we're calling HDRS data. Our prefix is HDRS. So that's going to be the start of our variable name. Our suffix is going to be week. So remember, week takes on values of 0, 1, 2, or 3. So in our new data set, we're going to have variables HDRS 0. So we're linking the prefix and the ID to create our new variable names. And the actual value of those variables is the value HDRS. And so proc transpose actually switches the rows and columns for us automatically. So let's first take a look at the first 10 observations of the original data set. So before proc transpose, here's our data set where we have multiple observations per patient. And now we're going to do a printout of the HDRS data showing the first 5 observations and how it looks because of the procedure proc transpose. So you see here that this was automatically done by proc transpose. So here we have our single patient 101. The prefix of the variable is HDRS. The suffix is the variable week, so it's basically concatenated this prefix with week to create a new variable named HDRS0, and the value of HDRS0 is the value HDRS, which is our Hamilton Depression score. And here the value of HDRS1 is -19, which is the Hamilton Depression score for week 1 for patient 101. So to kind of make this a little bit clearer, let's say we changed our prefix to Hamilton. Let's see what would happen to our data set. So here we're changing our prefix to Hamilton, and so we would expect that our new variables would be Hamilton 0, Hamilton 1, Hamilton 2, Hamilton 3, because this is just our prefix that's used for our variable name. So let's run this code again and see what happens when we do this. So I'm going to run that, and then I'm going to run the proc print and see what our output looks like. So notice here we had the exact same transform data set, but our variable name has changed because we altered the prefix. So here we have the exact same output, but with a different variable name. Here we have the variable name HDRS because we had our prefix as HDRS. Proc transpose is a very, very efficient way to restructure your data set. The challenge is that it works great if you only want to transform one variable. However, if you have several variables, then it may be more efficient to use the within the data step method of transforming your data set. So in the example above, I was interested in transforming two variables, HDRS and IPL. In this last example with proc transpose, I was only interested in creating single observations with the variable HDRS. This concludes the demonstration, restructuring SAS datasets, multiple records to single record.